Hello, hello.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the INSO online talk series, Arts Beyond Distance. I'm Ejen from the INSO Arts and Culture Foundation. I'll be the moderator throughout this whole season 2. So we have 5 episodes in season 2. We are now on our third episode. So Arts Beyond Distance is created to bring distance closer. Basically, we feature one Malaysian artist every evening, and then we talk to them about their motivation, the process of creating art, and the challenges they face. A little bit of like up close and personal with the artist. So we have been receiving quite a lot of positive feedback. Thanks to those who are with us along the journey. And we hope this platform carry on to inspire as many. So this evening, we are very lucky to have Mahen Bala with us. Hello, Mahen.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
So would you like to maybe start with a little introduction of yourself? Yeah, like who you are, where you come from, and what you do.
Um, Good evening, everyone. My name is Mahen Bala. I'm a documentarian. And what a documentarian essentially does is someone who's very interested in keeping records. So in my line of work, I'm very interested in keeping records of my relationship with my environment. So in that way, I tend to look at things or subjects around me that I think is very interesting and is worth documenting right now. And then I would go out there and document it in the hopes that when we create this, let's say, an archive of a contemporary look at our surroundings now, our environment now, then we might be able to look back once we have gone further enough, like into the future. Because right now, if we look at what we have about Malaysia, in order to understand the history of the Malaysia, we fall back onto a lot of material that were created by scholars who were working here in the past. And we might go back to, like, let's say 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And I find it slightly problematic that a lot of the conversations that we're having today still relies on material that was created about 100 years ago. It feels as if we have not really moved on.
Yeah.
So this was a problem that I think we are not writing enough about ourselves. We tend to look at a lot of things, but then we don't digest it and then write it as a form of like a permanent record. So there is this deep fear within me that 50 years down the line, we would end up having this almost like an amnesia. We try to look back at our past. We try to look back 50 years, and then we realize, oh, we don't really have anything. What we have is we go through other people's Instagram records to look at how life was back then.
Yeah.
But then nobody does that, of course. So with that strong desire to create a bulk of material like this, with this purpose, that's why I do what I do. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yes.
No, so I mean, the medium that I work in is also photography. I sometimes make films, and then I also write. So I tend to move between these three formats, these three mediums.
So we have seen quite a few photos of trains and train stations and in the very beginning. So are you working on this? There's this project about train.
Yes. So essentially, I spent the last 3 years working on a project titled Project Carita Paquita, which really set out to document the history of our own railways, the Malaysian railways, because I felt like it was something that we were all very familiar with, but we were not doing anything to actually document it. It was something that was very much stuck in the past, because every time we talk about the railways, we go back to the good old British era, like how things were in the past. Those days were the good days. But then we were not creating enough material with about how we feel about the railways today, how we relate to railway heritage today. So that project took me about 3 years, where I documented the line between Gemas and Tanjung Pagar in Singapore. So this is what you call the Southern Line.
Yeah.
So this line was is actually due to be refurbished, renovated, right?
Yeah.
And the stations, the 100-year-old stations along this line, will be demolished so that new ones can be built.
Yeah.
So that was when I felt like this was a race against time. Like I had to go and document all these things,
Yeah.
all these buildings. But apart from the building itself, my project is more interested with the people who are living in these small areas.
Mm-hmm.
Because many of us would know, like, oh, Tanjung Pagar station is the big important station. Singapore, of course, it's important. But then there were so many other smaller stations along the way that tends to get, how would I put it, left out in the writing of history.
Mm-hmm.
We would look at all these other important places, and these places we just look at them as by the way things, you know. So I tried to give more importance to all these smaller places.
Mm-hmm.
So this so I ended up completing the project, and I was finally published into a book. So the title of the book is Postcards from the South.
Mm-hmm.
And this book has become like a complete record of this entire line and the lives of the people who have relied on the line, and also people who have worked on that line. So that's my primary interest, looking at the people. And so this book is essentially a collection of history and also oral history, what people remember, how people relate themselves to the history of the railways. And it was my hope to actually put together a book that anyone could open and read and essentially experience the railways as a very Malaysian experience.
Yeah.
So as you're flipping through this book, you would read interviews in multiple languages.
Yeah.
And everything feels very rojak in a way.
Yeah.
There's a bit of everything inside. And I think that's essentially how we live our lives as Malaysians. Nothing is ever clear cut into like one nicely packaged box, right?
Yeah. And I seriously think this is the beauty of Malaysia and being Malaysian. Yeah. For those of you who are interested in this, you can also log into the website Project Carita Paquita, right? We will share the link later after the talk. So if you follow this Facebook page, you get all this information and you can check it out. It's a really nice. There were some photos and write up about Mahen's work. And so this 3 years project with the Project Carita Paquita has finished.
So it has come to an end with the publication of the book. I had dreams of actually continuing the project because there is 4 other lines that needs to be documented within Malaysia itself. Sadly, no one wants to fund it. It's like that law, Malaysian project, so no one cares. But in any case, I'm very, very happy and grateful that I've been able to continue this project and expand on it on a much larger scale. So right now, what I'm working on is I'm currently on a fellowship with the Japan Foundation Asia Center, where I've been able to basically kickstart a project called Longing and Belonging, Railway Heritage in Southeast Asia and Japan. So essentially what I'm doing now is extending the way that I'm looking at the railways and also communities, but throughout Southeast Asia and also Japan. So on my recent trip, I left the country in December. So in early December, I left the country to go to Indonesia, to go to Java. And so I was based in Jogja for about a month. And then I was based in Jakarta for a month. So I spent these 2 months traveling around the whole of Java, looking at 2 things. The first is how railway heritage is, the relationship between people and railway heritage across Java.
Right.
And then secondly is to look at how people across Java connect themselves to railway heritage and by extension to the land itself.
Right.
So after that 2 months, I left for Japan. So I was traveling through Japan for another 2 months before the whole trip was cut short due to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So then I had to leave Tokyo very quickly. I left Tokyo on the 31st to come back here.
Yeah.
So 31st of March. And then a few days later, Japan was already declared a state of emergency. So I was, in a sense, running ahead of the virus wherever I was.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I actually heard about it was when I was in a train in I think Jakarta,
Uh-huh.
and someone just joked and said, "Hey, there is this virus there is this disease that is happening in China, and
Yeah.
apparently if you're using Huawei phone, like it transmits through your phone." And then we were all laughing about it,
Mhm.
and we are not laughing now. Yeah.
Yeah. So the project is hanging in the air right now. So you're not done with the
Yes,
Japan.
the project has been suspended
Mhm.
for a very interesting reason, actually, because um, in doing this project, my method of working is, one, to visit railway museums wherever I can find them, right?
Mhm.
Secondly, is to meet people.
Yeah.
The bulk of my work is about meeting strangers, right?
Yeah.
And so, in this situation where there is a virus going on and social distancing and all that, I can't do both. The
Yeah.
museums are all closed and people don't want to meet other people. So
Yeah.
my project had to be put on hold. And then hopefully when things get better, when the situation is much better in Japan, I'll be able to go back and
Right.
continue my work.
Okay. All right. So we actually prepared 10 different questions in all these envelopes. And you can
Wow.
actually pick them randomly, and then we can just take it from there. So any
Okay.
number of your preference.
Lucky number third, number 3.
3?
Since today is May 3rd.
Okay.
The next one is number 5.
Right. Question number 3. Oh,
Wow, so big.
do you think an oh, can we see? Do you think an artwork has its shelf life?
An artwork. Are we restricting the definition of artwork to something that can be readily consumed by a viewer?
Good question. How would you like to take it? It's free. It's up to you. So you think, yeah.
I think the relevance of any piece of work, whether it's an artwork that is meant to be hung on a wall or a performance or whatever,
Mhm.
the shelf life or lifespan of this work is really a reflection of society itself.
Mhm,
As
mhm.
long as it resonates with society, there will be a need for it to be constantly reviewed and
Yeah.
consumed and looked at again and again.
Yeah.
But of course, this is something that is entirely dependent on the social values within that society itself. If we live in a society that looks at art purely in terms of entertainment,
Mhm,
expecting art to entertain them at every stage,
mhm.
and the moment that art is no longer entertaining, then it is rejected.
Yeah.
Then we have a serious problem where everything is created based on a very ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
And projects then only have a very short lifespan.
Yeah.
And that becomes very, very problematic.
Yeah.
It becomes problematic because there is no continuity.
Yeah.
And this idea and this concept of continuity also extends itself to, there are many aspects to it.
Mhm.
One is, of course, the ability or capacity for the artist himself or herself to continue working.
Yeah.
And there is also this whole thing about funding.
Yeah.
And looking at it from a larger perspective, and I think maybe I would just comment like briefly like how things are in Malaysia.
Mhm.
It tends to be very things come about very quickly and then they also die very quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because the excitement runs out. Everyone wants to start something new and then wow, it's so exciting,
Yeah.
but then
Because, yeah.
it
When
doesn't continue.
issue of sustainability, then
Yeah.
yeah, if we don't have a structure, a system that supports, it's really, really hard to sustain. Yeah.
So I think it's very important to reassess the kind of values that we place into a particular proposal or project before we even start it.
Yeah.
So throughout maybe my own experience in trying to get funding to do stuff and all, the milestone or the actual product of it, right,
Yeah.
is always geared towards the return of investment. Funders
Mhm.
are always looking at like, oh, what can I get in return? And usually what can I get in return is always in terms of exposure. How many
Yeah.
people are looking at this?
Yes.
But if we continue to do that, if we continue to pack this one value to projects, then we just end up having very popular projects.
Yeah.
Not a project that actually builds upon itself and goes on and goes on. So yeah, I think we need to reassess what is it exactly that we're looking for in projects.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. This similar conversation came out last night with Sharon Chin, because we discussed about how different measurements applied. How do we value that piece of art if we always use only one way of valuing? It just doesn't make sense, and art won't stay, or it won't grow. Yeah, it's true.
I think that's the thing, because continuity is not just about these two things that I mentioned, but it's also about how new upcoming artists, how they would go about thinking about their work. When there is continuity when there is an ecosystem that has continuity, then a budding artist, someone who's just starting out, will be able to look back upon all these other works and say, oh, you know what? I find it easier to place my work. I know where I'm going because I'm looking at all these other things that have already been created. I'm looking at a progression. But if an upcoming artist looks at a catalog of, say, events or exhibitions that has been done in Malaysia in the last year, and then tries to look for progression this year, and then sees there is no progression, then they also feel like, oh, I also need to work in this way. I also need to come up with one-off programs rather than something that goes on for some time. I think maybe that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because I also discussed quite a lot about arts management or arts administration on this end of how we can actually make this ecosystem grow a more all-rounded way. And then we realized the issue was that people don't see a career in working as art administrator, because this whole ecosystem is just not enough for them to actually survive, to constantly like work as a career. So I think this is really one section or one whole ecosystem that we have to slowly build it up, and for the betterment of how art grow in the country.
And I think one thing that I'd just like to share, maybe from my perspective, is that trying to start new projects is actually something that I think artists don't really like. It's a very painful process to put together proposals, to put this and do that and do that. I think at the heart of it, what we would really like to continue doing is to just keep working. That's it. We're trying very hard to find a sustainable model because we just want to keep working. And sometimes I feel like it would be very beneficial if there was someone, or whether it's an individual or a party or a foundation, where we can bring these completed works, right? And ask other people, what can I do with this? Where do you think I can go with this? And perhaps that foundation or that other party can come on board and say, okay, you know what? I think this has more potential. It can go further. Let's figure out how we can help you. We might not be able to help you directly in terms of funding to give you more money to do it, but let's see if we can connect you with other people. I think that would be very, very helpful, because sometimes it can be a very lonely venture. You go out there, you do a project, it's like a firework. You light it up, it bursts into beautiful flames, and then it just dies out.
It's
quite sad.
Once in a lifetime. But also I think in the sense that if we looking to push forward the artists to grow and the whole art scene, it has to happen this way, because right now artists is taking too much different responsibility on one self. They have to create that art, they have to market, they have to write proposal, they have to do everything basically, and at the same time come up with a model that they can sustain their life.
Yeah, which is not easy at all.
Yeah, that's really, really challenging. Yeah. But yeah, so let's move on.
Yes.
Question 5?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'll just
Right.
go with odd numbers today.
Haha, the same last night. Okay, the question 5. How do you deal with stress?
Oh, great. Okay. Very important topic that I wanted to talk about actually,
Uh-huh.
which is mental health in the arts. It's something that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons is that whenever we see artists in the media, we are always talking about success. The fact that you're in the media itself means, oh, successful, so you're very great, you know. But we don't talk about these things, about how we deal with stress, how we deal with failures. And this is so important.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't know, somehow it feels like it is a social taboo. Like we shouldn't talk about it and we should pretend it doesn't exist. On the other hand, maybe I'm the only one who's failing and going through stress while everyone else is actually very successful.
Yeah.
That could be the case. So this is a very interesting question, I think, because in my line of work, I deal, of course, with a lot of stress.
Yeah.
My line of work relies on me to understand topics and subjects in a very deep manner,
Yep.
and then try to help other people understand it, right?
Yep.
And in that process of understanding things, I also have to empathize with a lot of things, right? And this is very different from merely photojournalistic work, because photojournalistic is basically just going there, reporting what's happening, and then leaving. But documentary work, you have to have a lot of empathy. And in the many years, almost a decade of doing this, I realized that I've gone through a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, and I've internalized a lot of this stress within me. And whether it's documenting people in, migrants in Bangladesh, or going to natural disaster zones where there's a lot of death, there's a lot of trauma. You're being like, throughout this whole time, I'm being exposed to a lot of these things, and I've unconsciously just accepted, absorbed all these things until I've reached a point where I feel that they have become like a part of me. In a very in a slightly damaging way.
Yeah.
Because and I explain it this way, right? When you encounter victims of a particular violence, whether it's someone who just had been killed and whatnot, right? They would go on with their lives. Like the family members, of course, they go through hardship, but then they go on with their lives, right? And time heals. But then for me, I tend to only take that piece of memory and continue to deal with it like again and again and again, right? I've reached a point where when I'm exposed to, let's say, certain images, whether it's video or photos and all, I find myself trembling. I find myself feeling this deep fear, almost to the point of tears, where I find like I cannot look at this because it's too much for me. So a lot of the work that I'm doing now, I tend to move away from doing exposing myself to more traumatic, to more trauma. So I'm trying to use my work to sort of deal with it on my own terms. And throughout this whole period, whether it's stress and whatnot, I've always wished that there was an avenue for me to maybe talk about it. I'm finding ways to try to deal to deal with it. And one way of dealing with it, I find, is that to listen to how other people have gone through maybe it's a similar situation and how they have dealt with it. And what I'm looking for, like personally, is not really a situation where I'm to receive or to give advice, but rather to just listen to what other people have gone through. So I've been grateful enough that I do have friends who are in the same line. And sometimes when we get together and when we chat about the same things. And I've been able to also open up and share about these things. And I find it very therapeutic. So I'm always wondering whether this is something that maybe artists in Malaysia, um, not just in this country, but also in within the region, whether this is something that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
It isn't something that can just be swept under the carpet, because sometimes what we tend to do is we tend to equate suffering with artistic genius. It's like, oh, you go through all this suffering, right, and you create really amazing work.
Mhm.
Maybe so, but there is a lot of things that needs to be dealt with. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought this up, because I think this is something that needs to be talked about. Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one dealing with stress. Then maybe that's my problem. Um, but I do hope we will talk about it more.
Yeah.
And artists and not just artists, but people in the media. I hope we will have a time when it is not wrong to talk about this in the public sphere.
True.
We would
Yeah.
all feel that it's okay to be vulnerable. We are all human beings, you know.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
go through these things, and there's really no merit in coming out and pretending to be this polished, perfectly manufactured object.
I think
Uh,
because most of the time when we encounter a piece of art, it's the end product of the thing. So in a way, it is a success, and people don't actually see, or I don't know if people even interested.
mm,
Maybe there are
mm,
people interested with the process of all this stress and whatever that is, you know, went
mm,
through by the artist. Yeah,
mm,
and
mm,
that left artists in this fear that every time we see them, it's success.
mm,
It's
mm, mm,
yeah, yeah, and
mm,
it's true.
mm,
It's unhealthy. Then yeah, it
mm,
accumulates and it's
mm.
really dangerous.
Yeah, and it's also aggravated by social media, because we're constantly looking at other people and we only see the highlight reel. Wow, everyone is so successful. Um, yeah, quite
Yeah,
challenging in that way, which is why I'm not on Facebook anymore. I don't need to be reminded what other people are doing all the time.
yeah, it's true. Yeah. Okay. Next one. One more.
Number 7, of course.
Seven. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Uh. Oh. Hmm. A survival kit for an artist.
Wow.
So, do you have any like survival kit? I think many people have these questions. How artists actually survived, or maybe like in
Mm.
reality, how do they live? I mean, how do they make money and make art at the same time?
I think maybe it can be approached in two perspectives. The first is surviving your own craft, your own discipline as an artist. And the other part is also just surviving as a human being, as a living, breathing human being, where you have to sleep somewhere and you have to eat, right? And I think one important way is to perhaps try to find a balance in between the things that we do. The work that I do, documentary work, is thankless, and it doesn't pay well at all. It hasn't been something that I'm able to do like on a full-time basis. And so I rely on commercial work. So hence the filmmaking side of things. In the past, yeah, there was photography as well. But now that I've taken myself away from the country for a while now, I'm also in this very anxious situation where I'm wondering, oh, what happens next? Like after MCO, how You know?
Yeah, yeah,
And when people ask, oh, so what's the next project you're working on? Like, please don't ask me what am I working on. I don't know what I'm working on. So I think a survival kit for artists would be, um, I think having a mentor is quite interesting, and if for people who can't really work in that relationship of having a direct mentor, perhaps just having a group of friends where you can constantly just chat and talk. I think that would be very interesting. I think another important thing to have is to have exposure to various different kinds of material from artists from all around the world. So what I tend to do is I tend to go and look for artists who are also functioning in a similar industry, and I try to surround myself with their works. I try to read up stuff like and watch interviews like this to understand how they think, to understand how they deal with failures and difficulties that they face in life. So those are the kinds of things that I find it keeps me going. It keeps me in this situation where I feel, oh, that there is hope. I am able to function in this way and still live and breathe as a human being. But it's not easy. It's really not easy. There is this situation where a lot of people on social media, right? They will tell, oh, you have to follow your dreams, abandon everything and just follow your dreams. But a lot of these artists have a safety net. They come maybe from a rich family. They come from a rich family who has a lot of network, a very good network, you know. And so even if things fail, even if you risk everything and you fail, it's okay. But there are many of us, right? We cannot afford to put everything on the table. It's simply not possible at all. So yeah, and also I think the other thing that should be in that survival kit is to just have good relationship with people. I think that's very important. Treasure the friends that really care for you. Have good relationship with your family. It should never be a case where because of your art you tend to burn all this relationship with other people. That does not work in the long run. I think that would be my survival kit.
Just out of curiosity, how did you actually started in the very beginning, like when you did your first project? How did it happen?
How did I start? Let's see, how far back do I go? Okay, so if I were to go back like quite far back, I look back at all my works and I tend to notice that there are different phases in how I've worked. While I was still living in Kuantan, I produced a lot of art for art's sake. There was a sense of freedom in my work where during the monsoon every year, I'm basically allowed like 2 months of just quiet because it's just raining outside. It doesn't stop raining. And so for 2 months, I'm able to just sit down, write, paint, sculpt, create all sorts of things, right? And that was quite nice. I discovered a very different side of me that I think was creative in some way. And then there was a shift where I decided, I need to start working. I need to start making this my professions of some sort. So that was when I picked photography. I said, okay, you know what? Let's try this. And then I started shooting weddings. And so for some years, I was shooting weddings in Kuantan, where I was living at the time. And I was also starting to work on some commercial jobs in KL. So I was going back and forth between KL and Kuantan. And then came a year when I decided, okay, it was time for me to just shift to KL. There was enough work in the film industry at that time, also photography. So I decided to just, okay, you know what, let's just do it. I think I only started looking at my position in the world of documentary work a bit more seriously when I started documenting my environment in KL. Perhaps there was this need to have some sense of rootedness in the place that I was, because I'm not a native from KL. I started working on a lot of subjects that was related to the history and culture of KL itself. So when I look back, there are a few years when I just kept working on KL. And these works were being published in various publications, appearing in many different forms. And that was essentially how I started doing this. And so for the next few years, I expanded my work to also include other parts of the country, travel extensively throughout the country. And so one project to the next, yeah, that's how it has been so far.
Yeah.
And I think now is also a rather interesting phase for me, because I felt as if I'm done with doing works that are purely documentary. So
Mhm.
now I'm sort of giving myself a bit of leeway to do work that I find true to myself. So I'm looking back at the past, like a distant past, and feeling, what was the state of mind that I had back then, and do I still have it? A part
Uh-huh.
of me feels as if that creature that felt this freedom is now lost.
Yeah.
And so now, in my travels in Java and Japan, I've been able to sort of reclaim that sense of freedom and also confidence in just creating works that speak to me.
Yeah.
So now I'm in that phase.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So for those who are following this live video, you can actually check out mahenbala.com. There are more information about Mahen and his work. Yeah. So where were we? We can do one more.
Yes, number one.
Number one. Okay. So who inspired you the most?
Who's inspired me the most? I would say it's my mother.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of the things that she has done and continues doing inspires me in many ways. One story that I would share is a very personal story, and I think that has been very instrumental in the way that the way that I am today. Is I remember while growing up in Kuantan, my parents would put a lot of effort in surrounding me and my siblings with books. So we spend a lot of our times reading books rather than watching television and all the crap that's on television. So, but the problem while living in Kuantan is that books were rather hard to come by. And
Mhm.
so, to their credit, to my mother's credit, and to my father's credit, they would go out of their way to look for secondhand books.
Right.
And whatever these topics were, a lot of random topics, we were always just surrounded with all these books. And I distinctly remember this one time when I went with my mom to a mall. At that time, there was only like one or two malls in Kuantan.
Mhm.
And in the basement of this mall, there was this clearance sale going on. And there's this books clearance sale. So there's a whole stack of books. And at that time, I was interested in so many different topics. I was interested in studying religion, in culture, in paranormal stuff, all sorts of crazy things. And I remember taking this huge stack of books and begging to my mom, like, "Oh, I need all these books. We need to buy all these books." But we were very much a lower middle income family. My father was a government servant, and my mother was a housewife.
Mhm.
Um, so we didn't have much disposable income. And I distinctly remember at this time when my mother told me, "Oh, just wait, okay, just wait for a while." And so she would go off somewhere, and then she came back and she said, "Okay, let's just pay for the books." So we bought the books, and I was very happy with it. And these are books that I still keep with me now. And it was only many years later that I found out that she would sell her whatever jewelry that she had on her at that time, to make sure I could buy to make sure that we could buy books. And she would work very hard late into the night at home, doing all sorts of odd jobs to get back that jewelry. And I'm
Mhm.
very thankful that my parents realized the value of education
Mhm. Mhm.
at a very early stage. So I'm most thankful. And I think a lot of what I do today is also inspired by that act.
Mhm.
And I feel like whatever that I do today, I try to do it as a way of repaying her sacrifice. Although
Yeah.
I think no matter how much I do, I would never be able to repay it completely. But I think it gives me some sort of core to latch on to. So sometimes when I'm sitting down and thinking, oh, no one cares about all the works that I do, it's so hard to continue working.
Mhm.
I try to think about all the things that she has done. I think about all my friends who care about my work. And all the random strangers who come up to me or who write to me and say, I'm very thankful that you did this, like, thank you.
Yeah.
These are the things that sort of just inspire me to continue working, to continue feeling that there is some sort of hope in doing this. It might not be worthwhile, or it might not be easy now, but I hope it will be beneficial of some sort in the future. My biggest fear is that we arrive in a future where society is not bothered about looking back. And that would be the greatest tragedy of all.
Yeah.
So I hope we become a society that's matured enough to be able to assess our present and also keep looking back. That's very important.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful story, and yeah, I think it would inspire a lot of people,
Hopefully.
especially those who are about to go into the arts, or who are struggling in the arts and constantly asking themselves why do they even create art. That there is, I mean, as a society at large, maybe we don't really feel so much on a daily basis that the work that artists create is being valued, but it is. That there is, people who actually valued all these different arts that is existing. Well, we have quite a few questions coming in from the audience. Okay, let's maybe pick up a few of them. So there's this first question. Is there going to be a reprint for Postcards from the South? Before that, can we still get that copy of the book, or where?
I'm not sure. I think the best place to ask would be the publisher, Gerak Budaya.
Okay.
But as far as I know, there are very, very limited copies left. Is there going to be a reprint? Not anytime soon, because I would have to go out and look for funds to reprint it and all that. So.
Right.
Not yet.
So if one would like to get one, it's best to go to Gerak Budaya?
I think the best would be to ask Gerak Budaya. Maybe you'd be able to find it at Kinokuniya as well. Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
How many copies did they print in the first?
1,000.
All right. Okay. Okay. So next question. What would you love to see more in the Malaysian art scene?
Wow. I would love to see projects that have some sort of social responsibility to attach to it. I think that would be interesting, because it's always nice to create, especially artists who are publicly funded, who get funds that from a public source. I think there has to be some sort of social relevance to the projects, so that not only it is something that builds upon itself, what we talked about continuity earlier, but it also has a sense of importance and relevance for very lay people, just very normal people who want to access it. And it's not just the kind of projects where you have to have a degree in art history to be able to understand it. Like, what the hell? If you're doing that, then you're creating for a very, very niche audience. And if you do create for a very niche audience, then if you're happy with it, if you're satisfied with it, then it's okay. But if you create for a very niche audience and then you say, oh, Malaysian people don't care about my work, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot, I think. So I think artists themselves have to take some sort of responsibility in not just making the work relevant, but also talking about their work, making themselves accessible in a way to talk about this work, about their work, why they're doing it. It can't just be something that's extremely symbolic that you put there and expect people to read into it and discover hidden meanings in your work. I think of course there is a place, there's a time and place for that. I'm not saying that all projects have to have some sort of social responsibility, but I think in this time for the Malaysian art scene, I think that would be nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, I completely agree. Because I think the different roles that art exists, among them is one is to reflect the society and one is to archive the era. That is two very important
That's
roles.
very important. Yes.
And that is the reason why we still have and we still need art, and that's also a few reasons that how arts is different from entertainment, and why it's still existing, and we still need, so because there's these different roles that art plays apart from
Absolutely.
being
Yes.
entertaining. Yes, it's true. And there are quite a lot of questions today. Okay, this one. How do you get people to notice you as an artist?
I think this really goes back into the kind of values that you sort of seek from yourself in doing this. I tend to not focus on whether people look at me as an artist or not. I'm just completely not interested in that. I take the philosophy of just going out there and doing, and let people decide for themselves what is it that I'm doing. And along the way, I've created a lot of material, and some people will look at and will look at the work that I'm doing and say, "You're functioning very much as a visual artist." And then I arrive at this situation where I'm thinking, "Oh, is that what I'm doing? Is that how I'm being perceived? Is that how people are looking at my work?" Then that's what it is. So I don't try to define it from the offset. And this is actually very bad advice because anyone who wants to become popular as an artist would tell you all sorts of things that you need to do to get noticed, including stuff like posting stuff on social media, doing this, going viral. And people would give you advice like, when you have an Instagram account, make sure all of your content like is consistent, everything looks the same. That's nonsense. I mean, if you're an artist who creates the same thing all the time, then okay, I think you're quite a boring person in that way. Sorry. But I think if people just decide to be honest with themselves, and that's perfectly fine. So I would be a very bad person to ask for that kind of an advice. I hope that makes sense in some way.
That's interesting, because all the time when I see this question, I'm thinking, so how do you get people notice you as an artist? But I am more interested in why. And
Yes, you bring up a very good point. It should be a question of why rather than how. But thank you.
How does that affect you as an artist and affect your work, the work that you create?
So I think, thank you very much to the person who's asking the question. But just keep working and just keep producing, and the work should speak for itself, I think.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, next one. If money was not a problem, what would be one project you would like to work on? One where you drop everything you're doing and jump straight into it fully.
Oh my God. If money wasn't a problem, wow. I think if, okay, maybe I would rephrase it as, if I was given like a lot of money and unlimited funding, what I would do is I would create an archive, right, that is freely accessible to everyone. All the material is freely accessible, but most importantly, this archive has a small team of people that I can work with as documentarians, young people, and we would work together to decide, oh, these are interesting things that we should be working on in Malaysia. Let's go out there and do it. So my ideal project for Malaysia would be this ultimate archive of anything and everything that's related to Malaysian culture, Malaysian history, because I know there is a need for it. People are constantly looking for it, but there is a lack of supply for it. And because of this, and because of a lack of funding to actually go out there and do these things, we tend to just feel, okay, don't have, What's the next best thing? Let's just make stuff up. And I'm speaking for this based on experience in filmmaking, in commercial filmmaking, where in other countries, whenever they approach a project, they would hire a researcher to go out there and do real proper research. And in Malaysia, there are very few projects that have that luxury of doing it. And even when you have a researcher, there isn't a proper archive of doing this. If you go and look at the national archives, which should be the ultimate source of material, you would find amazing wealth of material from a distant past. But then the newer materials are all just pictures of events happening, not even good pictures. So there are no stories that we can relate to and compare. Like, how is life going on in today, the present time, and can we compare how much things have changed in the past? And this becomes very problematic because we don't know how people were functioning in the past and what people were thinking about in the past, what kind of concerns they had in the past. So I think this would be the ultimate project that I would just love throwing myself into. I did put together like a proposal to do it multiple times in the past, but it's just very hard to get funding for it.
But would you maybe consider how to say a model that combines that maybe like let's say run a company that could do something like this? I don't know. You know, that's the very trendy creative entrepreneur kind of that maybe maybe would you consider that? Or
I would if I have people that I can work with to develop something like that. As much as I have the passion and the know-how to do documentary work, I do not have that skill set in running it as a business. So this is something that I would definitely rely on someone else to say, let's work together to make it something sustainable.
Okay, one more. How can we increase the appreciation of the arts in Malaysia? Oh, all these questions are so big, and
I think one of the most impactful way is to go and see art for yourself and then talk about it. That's very important. When you go to an exhibition or to a performance or you read a book, and you can go on social media and just write about it, talk about it. If you think it's crap, write and basically say that you think it's crap and then justify it. Then you start a conversation. And it's only when you justify it with facts or reasoning, then even the creator themselves can come on board and say, oh, I'm very surprised that you feel that way. Let's have a conversation about it. So I think we should talk about it a whole lot more. I think one of the problems that we have as consumers of the arts in Malaysia is that we tend to only see ourselves as consumers. We don't see ourselves as being a participant in it. So then we would look at something like, not nice, this one. Then you would just tell people like, don't bother going, like, not nice. Especially when it's something that is free. You know, it's worse when it's something that you pay for, and then it's like, what horrible that performance. You know, or that performance was really, really good. I think either way, just talking about it creates this awareness, and this is very important awareness. When other people see that you are involving yourselves in the arts, then it becomes a natural thing. It becomes a normal thing. Like, oh, there's something going on. I should go and check it out. So then you don't feel isolated or detached as if, oh, that exhibition, right, is only for a small group of people who are already involved in, that small circle. It's not for me. So I think that feeling of being involved and involving yourself is very, very important.
Yeah, it's true. I think this whole appreciation thing also tied up very, very strongly with the visibility of the arts in the country, because I do actually receive sometimes comments on people who are not usually involved in the arts, not complaining, but they they're having problem in knowing what's happening in town, or because we don't even have a central portal for everything that happens in town. So
Or sometimes we have
kind
too
of
many.
ad hoc and here and there. So if you bump into that information, then you get it. If you don't, then you don't. So yeah, we really need, because this also involve a lot of different parties to work together. For example, we could have the public transportation support to have it on the buses, and then everyone on the street would see. But then all this kind of the structured system is not mature enough for audience to actually access that information. And more, then we talk about like appreciation. So in the very basic, like, we need that visibility to be
And I think it also falls onto the audience themselves to sort of go out there and actively look for things instead of just passively consuming things. But also the artist plays a very important role in making work visible. Think of new ways to go out there and do it. There were times in the past when I had friends help me put out flyers, and these are things that you're going out there and just making direct contact with people. It's a little bit of hard work, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
Making it visible.
Yeah. Okay, the last question here. What is the most unforgettable experience during this MCO that might enhance your future work?
Wow. Unforgettable experience during this MCO. I think one of the most unforgettable experience is that this is one of those rare moments in a long time when I've been able to just sit at home quietly and look back at a lot of the stuff that I've left behind, things that are left incomplete. So I think that has been very important to me. I've been able to just sit at home and just spend a lot of time reading. Which is, I think, the greatest luxury that we can all have, is to just sit at home quietly. Of course, I think the other unforgettable, I think a very interesting experience that I had was, while I was traveling in Japan, it was approaching lockdown. So it was a very surreal Japan that I got to experience. And so my Japanese friends were also telling me, it's like, you know what? Even though this is the worst time for you to be in Japan, it's also the most interesting time for you to be here. And I thought, yes, that is very interesting, because I will never be able to experience a Japan like that ever again. Like, imagine going out on the streets in the busiest areas, whether it's Shibuya, Shinjuku, and whatnot, and streets are practically empty. It's crazy. And then and during that period was also the cherry blossom period, and it was so sad. It was rather unfortunate that Hanami, the cherry blossom viewing, had to be cancelled. Such a tragic event for Japan and for everyone who was in Japan, like, at that time. But I think this was a very interesting time to look at how an urban landscape sort of functions when everyone is told to go against what is instinctive, which is to spend time in public areas with other people. So all of a sudden we are told, hey, what all these things that you're doing, all these things that is so normal is suddenly wrong. Like, you shouldn't be doing this. And on top of that, this is the one event in human history that is experienced by everyone across the planet at exactly the same time. Nothing else is like that. When some sort of a tragedy or whatever happens in another country, we are consuming it as a separate thing. We are looking at it like, oh, that's happening over there, so it's separate from me. But now everyone is at home together. So I think this is a very fascinating time to be in. Tough times, yes, for the people who have suffered and all, but also very interesting.
Yeah, it's true. I'm starting to think about how would this new world would look like. Well, so thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to those who follow us along the way.
Thank you.
Please remember to fill in, there is this feedback form You can even suggest like which artists you would like to see on the next season. Thank you, and we hope to see you again tomorrow and the day after. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.